We now come to our final panel of our Festival for Future. Thanks for being here. And it's a very important topic that we have today. It's about our privacy and ultimately our right to digital integrity in the digital world. We now, in a minute, I hope, have someone with us here today who really took a lot of hardships and risks to show us what is at stake in that space, and to unveil the wrongdoings of one of the greatest powers here on Earth. So, unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, we can't have her here today on stage, which we plan to, but we will have her soon in our Zoom channel, and we're waiting for that. In the meantime, please welcome on stage Alexis Roussel. He's the Chief Operating Officer of Nymtech. He's a lawyer by trade. He's an early Bitcoin adopter, and he's deeply involved with the Swiss Pirate Party. Thanks for coming to Munich, Alexis.
Thank you for having me here.
Yes, I mean, shall we start? I don't know.
Yeah. We're going to start.
Yeah, we're going to start. I mean, we live in a digital world now where data constantly gets generated, gets collected, gets sold. That is the main business model that we have. And of course, it's not only, it's a great tool to have. We have Netflix, we have Twitter. Oftentimes, it makes our lives much more pleasant. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of stuff going on. There are bad actors who can combine all the data and do stuff that we don't want. Maybe you can start by giving us some details about what's happening behind the scenes.
Well, it has been, what is happening is that when we created Internet, which is a fantastic communication tool, there was no economy, no business model around this, right? So when we start to providing those services around, companies started to find out how they can provide services, paid for services, and they found out that actually they had in reach a massive amount of data. And when we talk about data, we have a false perception of what the data is. There is our data that we publish, things that we write, right? A picture we are sending, conversation that we have, but this is just a very small set of the data that we produce and that we are represented with. And the most of the data is our metadata. So this is our connection logs. When do I connect on which computer? If I'm going from my computer at the office to my phone in bed. All these data are being publicly, not publicly, but are freely available to people who can observe them. And obviously, people who observe them are people who have a certain power in the digital space, service providers, governments, search engines, social networks. And they use this data to actually sell advertisement, try to observe us, try to manipulate us, right? And this has been very well described in the work of Shoshana Zuboff, the surveillance of surveillance capitalism, where this data is considered as the oil of the new world, or the oil of the 21st century, because you can extract it, you can take it, extract it, and make value out of it, right? And we see in the world there is like two big movements right now. One is a more US-driven movement where data is being used for commercial and security reasons, and data is a commodity, it's an object. Right? You can take property and ownership of someone else's data. And then you have a more Chinese and Russian area where data is considered as part of the common good that the government or the state is responsible of, and they can take it and make it whatever they want with, right? For the bigger purpose of the society. and this is where social scoring comes in China, where everyone has a mark out of 5, you see, and if you're below a certain mark, you're not allowed to take a train ticket or a plane ticket anymore. These kind of things are coming also our way. So we need to find another way. And in Europe, we're fighting for privacy because we feel that that's the right angle of attack. But we feel that this angle attack needs to be reviewed. And that's one of the proposition of our work right now.
Mm-hmm. So now, yes, you already said it. You work at NIM. You want to create a new, let's say, infrastructure for the net. Could you give us an overview what NIM is all about?
So NIM is when you think about privacy, you're thinking about having a conversation with 2 persons, right? And naturally, the conversation you have with this that we have together, okay, now obviously it's a public conversation, but if we were alone in this room, we would expect, I would choose exactly what to reveal to you, right? Mm. And no one would observe this conversation. And this is our common understanding of a private communication. So even if I'm using Facebook and I'm using a private communication, Facebook Messenger, to talk to someone else, I decide to reveal what I want, and I expect no one to read that conversation, right? Mm-hmm. But the thing is that now with the digital tools and the metadata which is around, we can derive 80% of the content just by observing the communication, because we can find patterns, right? So the idea is to find a way that there is no way to observe any communication. So what we are doing, we are creating a network, an environment where there's so much noise that anyone who's observing and try to find out who is communicating with whom it's impossible for this person to identify the communication, even if you're the NSA or if you're a big adversaries, what we call global passive adversaries. So people who have enough infrastructure to read the whole network, like Deutsche Telekom, for example, requested by the police. Mm. They could look at this, right? So how do we do this? We create an infrastructure of computers.
Do you actually need the video on?
Oh, yes.
Would that help?
We can look at the video.
We have a video.
Yes? Hmm? No, I don't have news, I'm sorry. I'll call her again, yes. I'll just call Chelsea again, right? And very quickly, and then... sorry.
Yes, so now we have the video in the back. Oh, yes.
You're here. Okay, you're connecting? She should be there.
Okay, so.
She's connecting?
Yes, she's connecting in a few minutes.
Okay, perfect.
So maybe you just continue. Yes.
So in the meantime, so you will see it's these are different types of networks which some of you are already using to try to improve your privacy, because this is something which we are getting more aware that by observing our metadata or by observing ourselves, people can manipulate us. So people are using VPNs. Mm-hmm. People are trying to use Tor to protect themselves, right? In reality, people are using VPN mostly to try to circumvent media restriction. You know, you want to see a movie which is available in another country. But here you can see that how we do is that all the communication between the people are cut in packets of exactly the same size, and we are mixing them with all the communication of everyone in a way like a deck of cards, that the order of the packets arrives in a random way on the other side. When someone is looking at the network, it cannot tell which packet is destined for who. And we add even fake traffic in the system, so that there is, it's very hard, the cost of trying to read all the connections on the network is too high for someone to attack the network. Mm-hmm. And this is how we create a layer of anonymity.
Okay.
But I would suggest we move to Chelsea.
Yes, we rewind the session for a couple of minutes, and then let's start from scratch. Chelsea Manning is an American transparency activist, a politician, and currently she's a security consultant at Nymtech, and we are really happy to have she now on our call in Zoom. Please welcome Chelsea Manning. Okay. Yes. Modern techniques.
Yeah, maybe just while she's coming. So there is a, as you said at the beginning, there is a link between the way we structure the network and also how the rights, our digital human rights, are being worked on. Right now, we focus with GDPR, with the German law, with I'm from Switzerland, with the Swiss law. We focus on privacy, specifically on privacy, but in the world which is open and transparent, right? And so the governments, they want to, at the same time, have all the tools of surveillance and use backdoors and use zero-day attacks. And at the same time, there's a pressure from the people and from some to actually provide privacy. And we need to solve that. But Chelsea is there, so.
Hi, Chelsea.
There's still a problem of sound, and so while we solve the problem of sound, and so by providing this layer of anonymity, we can create true privacy communications. And in the legal world, it's going to be also the same way. We're going to design a society separate from the surveillance of capitalism or the Chinese way of doing, where we will have a right to anonymity. Which will allow us to use those tools, which will force governments, our own governments, not to know anything about us, and then we will be able to have true privacy between ourselves.
Test.
Yes.
We are hearing you, Chelsea.
We are hearing you. Can you hear us?
Great. Hi.
Hi. Nice to have you here,
Sorry.
Chelsea. Alexis was just mentioning, we were just talking about the metadata that gets collected by bad actors and used against us. And you have a lot of experience in that space. Could you give us a quick overview of what happens behind the scenes when it comes to the collection of metadata?
Yeah, I always find it interesting or funny that people think that the kinds of data is like, often people think of the message itself as being the most important component of what you want to protect is the message itself. However, whenever you are trying to track the patterns or you're trying to track a pattern of behavior, metadata, which is the data that is attached to data, it's who's sending it, who's receiving it, the time it was sent, the size of the file, the amount of data inside of it, the type of data inside of it. All of these little bits and pieces of information, the who, what, tell you the who, the what, the when, the where. The message is the why, so you have 4 out of 5 questions answered. So in a real sense, metadata is the most important part of a message. And it's the part that a bad actor often finds the most valuable. It's not the data itself; it's the metadata that's associated with or attached with the data. So one of the reasons why NIM is so important is because of this fact, because of the fact that these different types of data aren't necessarily always protected by default through encryption, because even if you encrypt a message, you can still tell if you're a global surveillance actor or if you have access to both the sender and the recipient. You're able to, even without reading the message, learn who's talking, how much they're talking, how frequently they're talking, when they're talking, what locations they are at any given time if they are talking to each other. And so you're essentially establishing a pattern of life, a pattern of behavior, and sort of you're able to identify who's valuable, who's even if you can't tell what they're talking about, you're able to establish enough to be able to continue to further that surveillance and intelligence collection.
Yeah. So many people move through the internet day by day and quite carelessly. I think there's not a lot of awareness of what really happens. There's a false sense of privacy. If we think about the private tabs in browsers, you immediately think that you're private if you use it, but of course you don't. So
I disagree. I think that the majority of people online now do care about their privacy. They are aware of the fact that they are. But now there's sort of, it's not necessarily a complacency so much as it is a, well, what can I do? And you can't teach, and I've been having this conversation about within the US among people who are dealing with sort of the more intense things that are happening in the US right now, like abortion activists here in the US, like people who support the right to who are pro-choice here in the United States. Not like all of them are like, okay, how do we secure our information? How do we secure people's data? How do we ensure that women are protected? That reproductive rights are protected with this, because you now have an entire group of people who are facing a potential state actor threat group in a number of states in the U.S. Just sort of seeking like their own rights and what information they can have, because like even seeking information about this kind of information in some states may be criminalized very shortly. So these kinds of people, they're not security experts. They don't know how to set up, they don't know how to code things. They don't know how to set these things up, and they shouldn't. And I think that's the problem, is that in order to reach this sort of high level of where you're trying to protect yourself from state level actors, as opposed to just protecting your email address password, you're really dealing with a threat group that, the average person feels like they don't stand a chance against. And that's the sort of key of developing this kind of technology that's very plug and play, that works. You click a button and it works, right? And you should know that you're, NIM in particular has a sort of approach where, there should be a big green button to know that your data is secure, right? Mm.
Yes, but now you have NIM, and you want to really create a new infrastructure for the web. What's your plan? How do you want to roll out and really bring it to mass adoption?
That's an Alexi question.
Yeah, I'll get. So the first thing we'll do, we'll work on messaging apps, right? And one specific, like normal messaging apps. We hope that big messaging apps like Signal would adopt NIM in the background. It doesn't need to be seen by the user, but in the background. But also other type of messaging apps which are more also very sensitive, like cryptocurrency wallets, any financial apps. There is a lot of incentive from people who are managing financial apps not to be looked at, right? It can be cryptocurrency wallet, but it can also be like banking app, your banking app that you're using every day. There is an incentive for the bank itself to not allow other people to look so that they can protect their own clients. I think a lot of people are not happy that, for example, like a bank, that the police, the tax department would actually take data and know about their client without asking them properly, right? So this is the first point, is to build this infrastructure, build these specific applications, and then we are going to roll out. And one of the key things Chelsea is going to help us with when she's back is to actually work on the hardware, because we want this network. Today, this network is what we call an overlay network. So it actually runs on the existing internet, right? And it doesn't change anything of the TCP/IP that we are using currently. It runs on top of it. But with the help of Chelsea, the idea is to bring it below, to bring it at the hardware level, so that it is even more easier for everyone to use it without actually having knowledge of it. Maybe, Chelsea, you want to continue on that side.
Yeah, so from a technical perspective, one of the issues that NIM has currently is that because of the amount of encryption and the amount of protection that it provides, it is computationally very difficult because we're adding so many layers of what's known as entropy to the process. We're essentially shuffling a lot of decks of cards very frequently. And we essentially use a lot of math to do this. That's the cryptography part of math. But the cryptography part of math of doing this kind of shuffling requires a lot of energy. It requires a lot of time, and we're trying to reduce the energy load and the time. And you can't do that with software. What you need to do is you need to develop faster hardware and really build in the shuffling process down to a chip layer. And so we're trying to work on hardware optimization, which should dramatically speed up the network and allow data packets to go over the network in large bandwidth faster and more. So there's less delay between the sender and the recipient. So that way there is that it doesn't take as much energy across the network, so that mixers across the network and all the nodes across the network are able to process more data more quickly. And I think that a hardware approach is the best way to go, in the same sense as like you would add a graphics processor to a gaming computer to make or for video editing to a computer to make it work better. You would have some dedicated hardware to make NIM do the mixing.
I think what is also interesting is then once we have built this network and have the hardware which is adapted, is to find the incentive for people to actually use it. And we believe that one of the incentive that is going to be there for a lot of companies is that today, with the current regulation, and so especially GDPR is pushing this way, it becomes more and more costly for companies to manage personal data, right? So we are offering an option to actually reduce the amount of data that any kind of company or service provider would collect by default. And usually today, they have so much data that when they see this, they're like, oh, we could use it, We just had this example in Switzerland, where in Switzerland, when you go to the hotel, you have to give your name for a police you have to register on a police register. It's very specific to Switzerland, doesn't exist here. And it was for some security reason, but there was no intention to keep this data. But now they have computerized it, right? And now all this data is available, and suddenly this year they decided that they are going to use it for advertisement reason, right? Because the data is there. So one of the incentive of using NIM at one point will be for people actually not having the data, and it will keep the cost low and focus on their real product. And I think this is a real good incentive.
You told me before that one big part of the NIM ecosystem is actually a token. And Alexis also told me, Chelsea, that you are quite critical when it comes to the whole Web3 space and cryptocurrencies in general. So why did you still get involved with NIM?
So my whole involvement in this process started whenever Harry Halpin showed me the paper for NIM. What I found remarkable about it is, yes, NIM has a token, but it's not the main portion of this, right? So while it is a Web3 application, I don't view this as being a cryptocurrency or anything like that, even though it does have a token portion of it. I am skeptical of cryptocurrencies, mostly culturally, right? Technically, fundamentally, the math works. It checks out. The economics kind of works to an extent. I'm very skeptical of just sort of having cryptocurrency exist in and of itself, right? Like where you have a cryptocurrency and then it serves no purpose or utility in the real world. It has no immediate correlation to value, to a use, what I call is use value. In sort of my framework and my structure, my understanding of these kinds of things, I consider this to have use value, NIM to have use value. It is a utility. It actually it rewards people for being involved on the network. But the main part, because there's actually two parts of the infrastructure of NIM. There is the token part, which is the smaller part, is maybe a fifth of the sort of the code or the infrastructure, whatever. The largest part is a mixnet, which can operate in theory without the token portion. So the two parts of the infrastructure are a part of a stack. They're sort of a layered process. But the bigger portion, and the portion that I'm much more interested in, and that I've actually proposed independently before, in 2016, I proposed a mixnet that was virtually identical to NIM, in 2016. So I immediately jumped on this project and found it very interesting because of the fact that it incorporates the critiques that I had of existing privacy networks like VPNs, like Tor, so these like Tor, because Tor mixes the connections across the network, but it doesn't encapsulate all of the packets and introduce the false flag data, which is the sort of fake packets, the noise that's added to it. And so you really can't, if you're a global surveillance actor, it's much harder for you to disentangle the mixing process of NIM, which is exactly what I was proposing in 2016. So I obviously naturally gravitated towards this project, even though I was like, oh gosh, another token. Reading the paper, I became convinced that that the sort of structure of NIM is not built around the token, unless you're a node provider, unless you actually build a node, unless you are building infrastructure on the mixnet. You don't need to know any of this stuff. You're never going to interact with these things really if you're using this stuff. If you're using if you are connected to a gateway as a client, you're not really going to have to know the sort of back end of how this stuff works. So it's an infrastructure. It's a layering of the infrastructure.
What is really interesting is that we're fighting a system which is capitalism, surveillance capitalism, which has a business model, right? Their business model is to steal the data and to sell it to others, right? And we were trying to fight until now with privacy tools which come from the free software world, right? Which comes from a world of altruism, where the tools, the networks are provided for free and are supported through foundation models, right? So this has a limit to fight against a business model that has so much money and can lobby Brussels, for example. When you go to Brussels, you see Microsoft and Facebook everywhere, right? So now we have a chance, which is interesting, okay? There might be the whole speculation aspect of tokens and cryptocurrency, but we have the chance to have ways to build business models which also generate values by providing services which are providing privacy, right? So this is it's also an economic incentive that we can use, and we can be powerful with this. So I think it's a chance that we should try to use it. The token of NIM has exactly as Chelsea said, it's a utility token. And basically, you can also see it in the way that if you would buy a VPN, you would just pay for a subscription to a VPN, and you would pay for your €5 per month, right? Here you would actually, or people who would provide you the service, would buy the tokens and use it when they need it. So there's a kind of small disconnect, but at the end, you're still paying for a service. It might not be the end user who's paying for it. But at the end, when there's an infrastructure infrastructure which is there. If you want this infrastructure to be able to grow, you need to have a community which is actually have business incentive also to be there to provide this infrastructure to fight for the bigger ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, that would also, using a utility token here would provide some people who are vulnerable and would have their transactions by a bank, monitored or whatever, an added layer of protection.
There's now a lot of talk about the age of decentralization especially in the crypto space. So people say we now move away from centralized platforms into a world that is really
DeFi.
Yes, DeFi. Do you think that's actually happening, or do you think we just see an age of, or a phase of unbundling the whole stuff and then rebundle it, and then we see major platforms that are not called Facebook or Google but are centralized? What's your vision for that?
Who's that for? Is that
for you,
I feel like that's an Alexis question. I feel like that's an Alexis question because DeFi. Because like personally, I think that DeFi require one of the problems with crypto, and one of the reasons why I think that crypto crashed this year is because it's sort of like, where do we go next? With this. It's been a speculative asset. It's been used by mostly people who have quite a bit of wealth already. Unless you were very early in the game, I know of a few people who are in the game very, very, very early on who got super into this stuff. My assessment is that you're at least 5 or 6 years, maybe 2 or more sort of crash rises and bubbles and crashes out from there being a maturity, the level of maturity and the technology required for you to really have any actual successful DeFi efforts, that people would accept and would not view as too quirky. So I think that the sort of economic cycle of cryptocurrency, which is, it is going to have another bubble, it's going to have another crash, it's going to have another bubble, and then it's going to have another crash before I think we start to see some maturity in the system and the various states across the world. You have an understanding of sort of the regulatory framework, which I think is another contributor to the sort of crash bubble process, is the lack of regulation across the system. Because economically, I believe in regulated markets as opposed to pure free markets. But that's my opinion. That's not that. I think Alexis has a very different opinion on this one issue.
No, I would just very comment on your question. I think the tools are being decentralized, right? And it provides opportunity to anyone who wants to do something to do, right? So suddenly, if you're a 14-year-old guy or girl around the world and you can code a bit, you could actually build your own bank, and have a reach of millions of customers easily, let's say, And we had the same thing 20 years ago with newspaper. You could be a 14 years old person somewhere in the world and make up the biggest news article or website in the world. Right? So now we're touching the value. But of course, human nature is human nature. Not everyone is active and not everyone is doing stuff. So even though everyone has more opportunity to do stuff, there is always some people who do it and grab some service and provide some services and get some benefits. And you still have people who are controlling. But the tools are more decentralized, and I think there is more opportunities for like newcomers. If you start from nowhere, you learn. You go to school, you can learn code, you can learn certain concept, and you can still have a chance to do something fantastic in this world. While in the previous world, you still needed the biases. You had to, where you come from, the wealth you had much more influence. So I hope this is a good trend in that sense.
if you look at Germany right now and the program that the governing parties have, the right to privacy is a really important point in their program, but also they say they want to do everything that's technically possible to prevent money laundering, terrorism, financing, you name it, everything you have in that discussion. Is this an either-or situation for you, or do you think there's a common ground that, you know, that's good for both tasks? Preserving privacy on the one hand and doing everything technically possible to prevent money laundering, drug trade.
Yeah, so my opinion here is that the government always collects information and has a sort of BS reason why, and those are the reasons why. It's like a lot of this information aren't actually used for those purposes. It's used for other purposes. So that's my only that's sort of my opinion there, is that it's not that you have an either or, it's that, you know, the government lies and it says we're going to collect this information for this reason and then actually use it for a completely different purpose. So I think that while it is an either or in a sense, I think that I lean more heavily towards the privacy side of things, because I'm very skeptical. Previously being a part of a state actor, you know, from a personal perspective, and sort of having the mindset of collect it all, vacuum this data up, and literally use whatever excuse you can to collect this data, regardless of, you know, just so you can have public support for it. I lean very heavily towards the privacy and the protection and the anti-surveillance spectrum on this issue, mostly because I've used those excuses before in my own personal sort of role in being a part of the state surveillance or the surveillance state and surveillance capitalism to an extent.
What is interesting is that inside the governments, you have actually both tendencies are like sometimes seen in different agencies, right? In Switzerland, we have two specific agencies. One is the Secret Service, which has the mandate of collecting data and can use Trojan horses or like active tools which are based on zero-day vulnerabilities, right? This is the mandate they have by law. And on the other side, you have a cybersecurity unit, which is also a federal unit, which has the mandate to secure the whole digital infrastructure of Switzerland, right? And those mandates actually are contradictory by nature, because if one would know about a vulnerability, it will actually try to find a patch and and apply for a CVE, or how is this called? And the other would actually keep it, keeping everyone unsecure, because maybe they can use it one day to enter into someone's computer. So we need to solve it. This is a paradox which all governments have today. Or another one was the European Commission. When there were a lot of people were being surveilled, and then the security team of the European Commission said, "Oh, everyone needs to use Signal now," and then on the side, all the people responsible of the police representative or security forces representative went to see the European Commission saying, "Sorry, you cannot give this signal to the people because if you're using Signal, it's a bad signal that you give to the population because we cannot listen into Signal, right? So you shouldn't promote that, so please don't use it." So there's a kind of paradox there. My way to see this is that we need to focus on privacy, and we need to provide a right for people to protect their autonomy. So in German, it's digitale Selbstbestimmung, and to protect their digital integrity, digitale Unversehrtheit, which is you already have your physical integrity, which is protected, right? And one of the way of doing this is to enforce a right to anonymity, rather a right to not be surveilled, measured, and analyzed. And that will allow you to use tools, and it will actually force the government to use tools like NIM and encryption, and so in their relationship with the citizen. And they should have a way to create. We should have a way to create a society where the government doesn't know the data of the citizens unless it's really, really necessary for some specific reason. But by default, we shouldn't know it.
Mm-hmm. On a global level, sorry, do you want to add something?
No, I was. So the sort of law enforcement intelligence collection bits, those are important for consideration whenever it comes to these kinds of tools, and that's one of the reasons why. That's one of the reasons. That the fact that they exist is one of the reasons why there is this sort of oppositional force within the European Commission, within the European states, etc. But it's actually, I don't think that that's the biggest threat group that people are facing. It's actually large companies collecting data that are really the big problem here, because it's so unregulated, especially here in the U.S. And it's only been getting more and more unregulated from the U.S. side. So I'm thinking less along the lines of, what kind of information the Bundeswehr is collecting versus what kind of information, a Silicon Valley is collecting on you. Because I think that that's the larger threat that's facing people at this particular juncture.
On a global level, we right now see an increasing alienation of the Western world, so US and Europe, and the Eastern world, China, Russia. When it comes to information technology, do you think we see now two completely different systems evolving when it comes to privacy and information technology?
Well,
I think it's always been the case that we have been increasingly moving towards a sort of multipolar world, right? Where you have China, you have Russia, you have Brazil, which is its own sphere of influence at this stage. You have the United States, you have North America, Canada, essentially like molding together. Essentially, Canada is really a pet in a very real sense. So I think that what we're seeing is we're seeing the cementation, the crystallization of the regulatory frameworks that we started to see crop up from around 2004 to 2008. Around the aughts, the mid to late aughts, across the world, but it's been really crystallizing. And yes, it has been this way for a while, where you've had multiple electronic frameworks. But I do think that privacy and anti-surveillance networks that are decentralized have to essentially operate as one large framework that ignores all of the different regulatory frameworks, that ignores all of the different jurisdictions and whatnot, or at least is maybe not ignores, but is agnostic to them, right? Where NIM is the same if you're operating in Brazil as it is in Italy, right?
Yeah, so what is so this is absolutely true. The new tools that we are building, if we want them to be resistant to the old world is based on borders, right? And the internet is borderless. So we're going to build those tools which are borderless. What is interesting about data is between this East and West world, there is two different ways of viewing data. Data as a commodity, data as common good, as public good. And the ethics about what you can do is different, right? In China, you can create mass surveillance against the Uyghur, and it's totally okay. In the US, that wouldn't work if you would do this on black African people, American people. But what is interesting about these technology is they move from one place to another. So the AI or the machine learning, which is used to do the face match in China, is trained first there and then moved to the US, trained again there, and comes back into other tools. So there is a collusion between the systems, even though there is some antagonism at the same time, because they work in border framework, they work with transparent data. So our way out is without borders and without data, zero knowledge. Well, we can say it's a zero knowledge society.
Mm-hmm. So we're nearly at the end of our talk, and we open this up to the to questions from the audience soon. But one question, because it's the festival of the future and we want to end on a positive note, I wonder, of course, you build a technical infrastructure in the first place, but do you have a vision of a better society that goes along with that?
Well, for me, it's what we're trying to do in mostly Europe, I would say, because we have a humanistic approach. So we try to build a digital society with the human in the center of it, right? Where you keep your individuality and you keep your autonomy. But you're not away from the technology. You're in control of the technology. And right now, we hear a lot of this. I mean, the governments here are using this word, but they're not enforcing it. You know, they still they don't see this. They don't want to, because to allow people to be fully autonomous, it's also letting it go for a lot of things, right? And definitely a lot of countries are not prepared. So this is my utopia. My utopia is a world where we can create private communications between ourselves and the society, the tools that we have for the society are using the network at the same level. They're not. It's not the government who should be providing technical infrastructure. We have public infrastructure which is available, like the internet, like cryptocurrency for money, like a lot of messaging, decentralized networks for communication. And then if our government wants to talk with us, he would talk at the same level there.
What about you, Chelsea? What's your utopia in that respect?
It's hard to see at this moment. So, you know, while I am generally optimistic, I'm an optimistic person. I do see a path forward in which humanity starts to figure out some of the big problems facing it. Unfortunately, I do think that the next few years and to the next few decades, with the climate, with various sort of crises occurring layered on top of each other, with sort of things that have gone unreckoned in certain regions across the world, on the socio-political front, mixed in with the climate crisis. It's going to be a very bumpy ride, right? Everybody thought in the 1990s to about 9/11 that history is over, right? We figured it all out, but the truth is that we are about to go through a tumultuous historical period in all of human history over the next I would say 2 to 3 decades. But there is another side to that, which is that this is the test. This is a sort of crucible. This is the sort of these are the times which forge the path ahead, and the tools, the techniques, the resilient structures, the resilient humanity, like humane systems that we will depend on for the next century or two are going to be developed very soon. And that's how we're going to be able to move forward and get past this sort of difficult period that we are just in. We're just in the middle of beginning to navigate, right? So I think that I'm generally, while it's very hard to see what that looks like right now because we have some difficult times ahead, I do think we will ultimately prevail.
Thank you very much. So let's open this discussion up for the audience. Are there any questions for? Here we go. Do we have a microphone, please?
Okay. So normally we say ladies first. Is it okay that I start? Yeah. Okay. Hi, I'm Akash. I'm a future developer and product developer from Germany. and we have straight contacts to the security branch with Alexis Security in Monaco, and we would like to talk how can we bring even security in the space of internet to the children, that we can teach them to be secure in future, even if they are not secure, how to get secure. Yeah? So my question would be, what's your future topic? How would you decide those workshops?
I have children, so that's my connection point, right? And I'm teaching them some kind of basic security. So what is interesting is obviously you want them to learn about the deeps of the internet, but what I decided to do is because I'm already way ahead in the thinking there, so I decided to go through the Bitcoin route, okay? So you might decide something else, but the Bitcoin route is interesting. Why? Because the first thing you need to do with Bitcoin is to manage your private key, and it's an encryption key, right? And so the first thing you do is you set up a wallet, and you have to safeguard your key, and the key is in a specific format. And so the first thing you learn is that a piece of code can be something that if someone else gets its hands on it, it can actually take your money, right? These are very basic principle on how key signatures are made, how hashing is working, and then a bit further how a network is working, how we can someone can listen into a network and things like this. These are things which are I think should be taught in schools very early. Kids of 12 years, 10 years, 12 years old can understand these very basic principle, how to encrypt a message. You can even do very fun games encrypting messages and sending them over. And so for example, my daughter, she's 11, and she can recognize a private key. And she's not into computers, but she understands this single thing. So that would be my little piece of answer there.
I actually have a very different and interesting answer, because I've interacted in a few workshops with specifically older children. So we're talking mid to late teenagers, so from around 12 to 18 age range, and I'm gonna tell you that I was extremely impressed and actually learned some things about privacy from these folks, from these kids, because I was struck by how that age group in particular has managed to figure out and navigate with less instruction and less sort of like workshoppiness, right? Like I expected to be teaching things, but I was actually learning some new techniques in terms of like how to protect yourself online with the threat group and the sort of threat modeling that they have, and sort of keeping information from each other as students, keeping information away from the teachers as a student, keeping information away from their parents as a child, keeping, sort of being able to have fun and be able to live the life of a teenager in a world which requires them to have Zoom classes now, in a world which requires them to have a digital footprint whenever they go to the classroom, and for them to be able to use a laptop and still be able to be a kid. I'm struck by how much older people have trouble with this sort of thing versus younger people who seem to have an intuitive understanding of the threat model that they're facing, and adapt their sort of online profiles, their approaches to things, their use of VPNs, their use of encryption into the framework of their lives at a young age, particularly in the teens. So I don't have much experience or much insight into younger children, but I think the teenagers have I've personally learned some things from teenagers, which, and I do this stuff professionally, so I took notes.
So I think we started late. We have time for one more question.
this lady here.
Oh,
No,
two more questions. There's one, and there's one.
Yeah, hello. My name is Christina Kinne in real life, KS Princess in VR, and I embrace a lot of these immersive technologies like full body tracking, eye tracking, AR, VR, which I think will gonna change the world and will be like a household tool for everybody. And for my question, I want to stick with the means of eye tracking, which brings a lot of advantages to me as an end user. Like I could imagine wearing AR glasses who give me name tags and directions and everything. But the payoff is that I upload my most private data, like with eye tracking, with pupil analysis. You can find if I have a mental health condition, which one, how much I've slept, whatever, if I'm sad or if I'm anxious. And this is data I don't want to be collected anywhere. So my question basically is it imaginable that I could use something like Nym as like a interim filtering module to prevent Facebook or Apple or whatever AR headset I'm using from linking my most private pupil data to my real life person?
The short answer, I think, will be no, because their product is designed to work with the collected data, right? So you need to find alternative products which are designed not to do this. So I'll give you an example with a geolocation, right? You can use Waze or Google Maps. It's a great tool, right, to find your location. But you have to provide, you send the data constantly. There is an alternative. I mean, I'm using, there are some alternatives. I'm using, for example, I think it's called Magic Earth. And I think, I didn't go deep dive, but basically what it does, it downloads the map on the device, right? Then the device gets the geolocation, and then it's my device who's actually computing everything locally, and nothing is thrown out. No data is sent back to the servers of this company, right? So it's by design that we need to work, and today, most of these products are so good, so advanced, because those companies have huge business models, and they can put a lot of effort there, and they have this edge, right? So we need to work on those tools to make it better, and that's one of the game points. I think because we are building tools, this new economy without data, hopefully we'll have a business model which will be stronger than the one that needs data.
Yeah, I'm in agreement to an extent with Alexi here. I think that augmented reality and virtual reality platforms are designed to collect data. They don't allow you. There's a reason why the Oculus Quest, for instance, right, won't even let you log in without signing up for a Meta account, right? Without a Facebook or Meta account. I mean, these tools are tracking you at every single point whenever you use them at this phase. That's why they exist, and that's why they're trying to push out augmented reality and virtual reality. Because I think that I think that these tools are being adopted earlier than one of the reasons why these tools are being sort of adopted earlier in these spaces is to be able to do this kind of data collection as early as possible, because we're the next iteration. I think that the next iteration of augmented reality is still, in particular, AR technologies are going to be mostly used in the aerospace and the military space, in particular, because you already have your heads-up display, et cetera. That's a form of augmented reality, heads-up display for a pilot. I think that the extension of that is going to be where you see this technology really start to be developed faster and better. Because I think that for now it's sort of gimmicky for a lot of users to be able to use this kind of technology in their homes, because the military and space agencies have identified that AR and VR have technical limitations in terms of like, vertigo, seasickness, air sickness, etc. So I think that the reason why these companies are developing this technology and allowing people to use it early is because they know that they can essentially exchange their personal information for this. So I think that is the problem. That's why I sort of veer away from the AR VR space whenever it comes to like Meta and things like that, is because it's mostly designed as a gimmicky way to obtain information.
So I know that there are questions left, but we are way over time now. And I think that Alexis is still around, so maybe you can ask him directly. Chelsea, thanks so much for tuning in and the very interesting insights. Great to have you.
I'm terribly sorry for the technical issues. That's my bad.
That's fine. And thank you, Alexis, for coming to Munich for our Festival of the Future. And thank you for coming to our last and final panel of the day. I don't know, Wolfgang, do you want to say anything now? So, yeah, I think we have a closing of our festival soon. Thanks again, Chelsea. Thanks again, Alexis. Thanks for coming. And this is it. This was our first Festival der Zukunft.